So my name is Shane Lockwood. I'm the Director of Health for Plainville-Southington Health District. I'm also President-elect for the Connecticut Associations of Directors of Health, or CADH. So what CADH is, it's a collection of all the 72 health department and health district directors throughout the state. And earlier this year, we decided to form a subcommittee, which I'll go into in a little bit. But before that, I just want to introduce Dave Giannetti. Dave works here at Post as a program manager, and I think I got his title wrong because he just got promotion. Dave will go a little bit about what Post is as far as hosting this today, and an exciting program that is here at Post as far as training the next level of emergency management students. Dave?
Good morning, everyone. And I do have a complicated title. It's Program Chair of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, and also I am a co-director of Public Service Undergraduate Programs here at Post. I'd like to acknowledge my co-director, Cynthia Anger, is here. Cynthia, if you could raise your hand. I first want to thank both Shane and Adam for getting Post involved in this effort. Mayor O'Leary, Chief Martin, Deputy Chief Spagnolo, our contingent from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and all of our distinguished guests from the public health community and first responder community, welcome to Post University. This is an important issue to us. We do have, like I said, an emergency management and homeland security program. I do want to acknowledge three of our students who are here helping out this morning. Carolini Nascimento. Carolini, raise your hand, please. She's one of our student ambassadors, welcoming folks into the McDermott Hall over here. And both Joe Amendola and Asia DeGraw, can you please stand? They have both been working on the opioid addiction task force for the city. Thanks, guys. So Post, this is the third opioid addiction themed event that we've hosted here at Post, and we hope to continue to host these type of meetings and events. Just some housekeeping. Bathrooms are straight outside the door here. There's a unisex bathroom. There's a ladies' room out to the left, right around the corner, and there's a men's room upstairs on the second floor. Primary exit, if we had to leave the building here, the primary exit is right here to my right. We do have the fire department's here, so I have to do this. Right, Chief Martin? Secondary exits just out the door here to either to the left or the right. If we do have to evacuate the room for any reason, there's an assembly area right here at Lemoy Field that we can rally at. There's also another assembly area straight down this way at the Great Lawn, another rally point. Otherwise, thanks so much for being here at Post. If I can do anything for anyone here, I'm going to be here for the whole event. Please approach me and let me know what you need. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dave. And just one note about the program here. It started about 4 years ago as far as their emergency management and homeland security. And they've already started to graduate students. They've been successful as far as job placements. I think this was a very appropriate place to have this forum. So, as I mentioned before, we have this CADH subcommittee on opioids, or it's substance abuse, but our primary focus has been on opioids. I do want to introduce the other members of it. My co-chair is Dave Knopf from the Darien Health Department, and we also have Dr. Ray Sullivan from Brookfield, and Donna Colbert from Newtown, who could not be here today because she has a one-year-old grandson who's in town, and she's visiting with him, so we're happy for her for that. So as part of the CADH subcommittee, what we've tried to do is reach out to all different angles regarding this epidemic. We know that there's not one solution to this. We're not going to arrest our way out of it. We're not going to treat our way out of it. We're not going to prevent our way out of it. It's going to be a multi-themed approach that takes care of this. So the subcommittee met in August with Adam Rinko from the Waterbury Fire Department. He's also the Director of Emergency Management for City of Waterbury. We also met with Jeremy Rodrigo from AMR. And what we were discussing was just what information could we get out to health directors that might help them during this epidemic. We came up with the idea of this forum today. You all have handouts that I think will be able to help you as you go back to your department. And we continue to we have plans to continue this with other presentations down the road. So our first speaker is just someone who's always promoted public health, has been a great advocate for public health. In the past, I worked for the city of Waterbury, and Mayor O'Leary was great. Whatever the health department needed, he made sure we had the resources. Anybody who picks up a newspaper now sees Waterbury's efforts to be in the lead regarding the lawsuit against the opioid makers. Mayor O'Leary has been at the lead of that. I know both my towns that I represent, Plainville and Southington, jumped right into this. I mean, they see his passion, they see his dedication to this, and they signed up right away. So there's no better way to start this presentation today than letting Mayor O'Leary come up here and talk about all the great things he's done and he's had the city of Waterbury done.
Thank you, Shane. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here with all of you. First, I just want to acknowledge Post University. Thank Post for allowing this forum to take place here. It's a perfect location. I also want to thank Shane and for all the great work he did, and enjoyed him when he was with us in Waterbury. Was disappointed when he left, but seems as though he's doing bigger and better and doing well, so we're happy for you, Shane. I also want to acknowledge the work that Adam Ranko has done, Waterbury Fire Department, Police Department, Health Department, all the nonprofits. As I know I'm speaking to the choir here, you know, it amazes me still now in 2017 in October that more communities across the country haven't really accepted the fact that we are in this extraordinary crisis, and literally people are dying each and every day in every state across the land. At least 2 people die each day in little old Connecticut. So it's amazing to me that there hasn't been a more coordinated effort, although there's been a lot of talk about it in Washington and the political circles. But thus far, in my opinion, not enough action taken. For sure, I don't need to go into any specific details about any of this. You're going to have speakers here that'll do that. I just want to give you my own personal background of what I've learned a little bit about this and why the city of Waterbury decided to initiate a lawsuit against Big Pharma. So I'll roll you back to, well, I'll start with, I was in the Waterbury Police Department for nearly 30 years, and then I left as chief, and then I went on to become the chief of police for just a short period of time in the town of Wolcott, and then I ran for mayor, and here I am. 2002 was my first really, even though I was a policeman for all those years and we saw a lot of heroin on the streets of Waterbury in the 80s, and then when the AIDS epidemic hit, there was less of it. People were dying from sharing needles, and so we left the heroin trade for a little while. We went to crack cocaine. That was as popular and a little bit safer from the intravenous side of the coin. But where we really saw an increase again in heroin consumption in Waterbury was in the late 90s, and particularly in my own personal experience in 2002. And my son was a student over here at Holy Cross High School in his senior year, and actually, I'm sorry, it was 2003. And the principal called and said, geez, you know, I got a group of kids out in the parking lot. I'm pretty sure they're selling drugs out there. I'm not sure what they're doing, but we set the guys, some of them, I don't know if you guys were on that case, but I think Fred might have been, where I set up surveillance out there in the parking lot, and they were selling marijuana out there. The kids, students were buying it and selling it, whatever. We rounded up 6 kids that afternoon, and we had them down in the office, and when we searched them, you know, we found, in addition to marijuana, and one of the boys had 4 bags of heroin in his pocket. And this is 2003. So it startled me. You know, what's this kid from Holy Cross High School who comes from an extraordinary family outside of Waterbury? What's he doing with 4 bags of heroin in his pocket? And we talked to him at length, and he said they had his wisdom teeth out the year before, and he was prescribed opioids, and he got addicted to them, and his parents had no knowledge of it. He had a credit card, wealthy parents, and they weren't paying attention to his credit card, and he was using about 6 bags of heroin a day as a senior in high school at Holy Cross. So I was very taken back. The sad story is he's no longer here. His parents put him in rehab, and then he came out, and then he went back, and then he came out, and then he overdosed. But it really hit close to home. He wasn't a friend of my son. He wasn't a friend of mine. The family I didn't know them at all until this incident. But it really opened up my eyes, and I said, Jesus. Then that was all the way back then. Since then, here we are, 14 years later, and the consumption of opioids is just astounding, as you all know. So over the last 2 years in Waterbury, it's been extraordinarily awful. Matter of fact, this morning, and this is a very unusual morning, but this morning the fire chief just tells me we had so far 3 overdoses. Each of them survived with Narcan deployment, but it's not the everyday, but we have 1 or 2 a day for sure. And lately, we've seen an uptick in the number of deaths again. So we're probably around 40 deaths right now. And by the end of the year, we'll easily surpass 60, which will surpass last year. So what's going on? I started to research some of this stuff about 2 years ago. When I started reading articles about, finally it seemed as though the country was recognizing the consumption of opioids. Just for another second on my own personal experience, that same kid who was a senior at Holy Cross when this happened, just 3 years ago, had all of his wisdom teeth pulled out. And I went to his apartment to see how he was doing, and on the counter was a prescription that had been filled, and it was with 30 Vicodin. 30 Vicodin for wisdom teeth. I know wisdom teeth extraction is very painful. I also know that 30 Vicodin is a lot of Vicodin. So I said to him, "You're not taking these Vicodin. Sorry, you're gonna have to tough it out." I got him, went down to CVS and got him a bunch of 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, and he toughed it out for a few days. Same kid 2 years ago was playing basketball with his friends, hurt his thumb, or tore a ligament here, and had a 1-day surgery. The doctor, who was a friend of mine, I went to see him that afternoon, and on the counter was not the fill prescription, but it was the prescription. He said, "I didn't bother filling it because I knew you would take it." So, and on that it was Percocet, 30. And I'm saying to myself, I don't get it. And so I called this doctor and I said, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" He said, "Well, he doesn't have to take them all." I said, "You don't understand. How could you do this? All the data now is out there, and, obviously, we all understand in this room that you don't have to take them, but they do, and that's the problem. And then these everyday normal kids get hooked on this stuff, and they don't know what to do about it. They don't tell anybody. The stigma is awful. And next thing you know, they're in a real crisis. And that's just one little story. And I think most of you probably have had someone in your family or extended family or close friend who has dealt with this issue. And the stigma attached to it is part of the battle here. And finally, parents are acknowledging that their children may have a problem, or they may have a problem, or their brothers or sisters or cousins or someone could have a problem. That's a big step in itself, just to get people to recognize and not be afraid to share. I'm Irish, all Irish, and we don't tell other people outside of our world any of our internal family issues, right, Dr. Sullivan? And I have a family member, honestly, a nephew who has been dealing with an addiction issue. Thankfully, it's not an opioid addiction issue, but I didn't even know about it. They didn't tell anybody about it for like 2 years. I I found out about it by somebody on the street. How's your nephew doing? Why? He's doing fine. Why? Something. Oh, no, I just was asking. And I'm like, why is this person asking me this question? And then all of a sudden, I do a little snooping around and I find out, I'm like, why are people afraid to tell people about problems that can be solved with when you bring it to people's attention instead of looking the other way for so long until it's too late? I don't know. I mean, maybe our family's unique. I don't think so. What I determined a couple of years ago through a lot of reading and a lot of research, there's a local lawyer here named Jim Hartley, who everybody knows his wife. She's Senator Hartley, but Jim is a friend of mine, and he is a class action lawyer. And I started talking to Jim about this about 2 years ago. And together, we started doing some research about Big Pharma. And the reason why is I started reading in different parts of the country, Illinois, New York, Texas, where different attorney general's office in those states started initiating lawsuits against some of these big pharma companies. So, my initial reaction was, why the company? Why big pharma? Why not the doctors? Why not the prescribers? And Jimmy said, keep reading, thousands of pages of documents. And the more I read, the more angry I became, because Big Pharma had turned this multi-million-dollar business into multi-billion-dollar business in just a matter of 10 years. And Big Pharma knows all too well, that what they're peddling is highly addictive, and they're not training the prescribers properly. As a matter of fact, they're going just the other way. They're saying to the prescribers, this is the only way to treat pain management, both short-term and long-term. And as a result, these doctors who are out there doing their job, taking care of people, what they went to school for, what they believe in, have been prescribing these because this is what they've been taught. They've been taught in medical schools throughout the country. They've been taught when they're during their residencies in whatever hospital they choose to work in. They've been taught, honestly, that the best way for pain management is opioid prescribing. And the first town hall meeting we had about this about a year and a half ago, this really great young doctor from Waterbury Hospital came up to me after he heard the horrible stories from people who were in the crowd and talked about how they lost their daughter or son and how it all started with, not all of this, by the way, does start with prescription drug usage or, sports injuries and all that, but a lot of it does. A lot of it does. And story after story, this young doctor came up to me afterwards, and he was probably in his late 20s, and he said to me, I am devastated right now. I've spent my whole adult life so far getting into college with no money, getting into med school, working, 3 jobs, working my way through to try to help people. I've always wanted to be a doctor. I am a doctor, and I am part of the problem. Because this is what I know. This is what I've been taught. Prescribe opioids. It's the best pain management, both short-term and long-term. And he was absolutely devastated. I hear from this guy all the time now. And, fortunately, because of all the deaths and all the notoriety now, everyone is thinking about different ways to manage pain than opioid prescribing. So we've already made a difference in some ways. But what we found through all that research was in 2007, there was a number of physicians and others who had been sued, and it all ended up on Big Pharma's doorstep. And in 2007, big pharma companies, including the one in Stamford, which is the manufacturer of OxyContin, paid $621 million out to the plaintiffs of those lawsuits. And that was 2007. And by the way, everything that I read throughout all of that, and depositions from doctors and prescribers and providers and all the people impacted, was almost exactly the same as it is right now in 2017. They didn't learn one thing. They paid the $621 million, and then they went back and did exactly what they had been doing before, but they changed it differently. They came up with different companies that they funded, LLCs that were put together to go out and again push and teach doctors and prescribers and providers that it's still the best known way to treat long and short-term pain management is through opioid. They hired their own companies. They developed their own board of directors for these companies and went out and solicited in communities just like Waterbury. And they would get the most popular doctor or group of doctors in each community and wine them and dine them and take them on nice cruises and do all the nice things that they do. And then before you know it, the doctors would have these meetings in the back room of the Roma restaurant here in Oakville, or the D'Amelios, or the Ottavala, or Diorio's, and have all these medical folks in there, and they would wine them and dine them and give them $300 bottles of wine, and the next thing you know, everybody was on board to prescribe. And that's what happened, and that is the absolute truth. There is not 1 ounce of exaggeration in what I just told you. It's all documented, and it's all going to come out in some way, shape, or form over the next couple of years. So that was the story, and we decided in Waterbury. I went to the Attorney General's office, and they're great. And Jepson is probably the best Attorney General we've seen in our lifetime, honestly. He really is. And they're doing their own thing. It's just that they're caught up in the bureaucracy of the state of Connecticut, which I don't have to tell any of you about, particularly today and tomorrow. And someday we'll have a budget. We're not quite sure. But anyways, we decided not to wait, and I was talking to a bunch of mayors and first selectmen and town managers at a Connecticut Conference of Mayors symposium a few months back, and I asked them about their communities. And I heard from George Semple raise his hand. Oxford is right over here. He had 7 deaths last year in little old Oxford, 7. And I knew about a lot of what was going on in Region 14 because I have a lot of family out there, and they've had an extraordinary number of deaths for a small community, and it's awful. And then, of course, everybody across the state raised their hand. This community had this community had that. So I said, look, we're gonna file a lawsuit. You're welcome to join us. I talked to, we found a firm out of New York that's a national law firm that was part of the Big Pharma lawsuit in 2007. And they were the ones that were most successful in getting the verdicts. We hired them, or they actually took us on. We don't pay them. No community pays. No community will pay. And at the end of the day, if we're lucky enough to get a verdict against them, we'll split the money up evenly and fairly. And my plan, what to use the money for, quite frankly, is just an awareness campaign, an education campaign, and most importantly might be to continue to find ways to treat people who have opioid addiction and can't get treatment, particularly in the world that we live in without insurance. So we're not in this for the money, quite frankly. We're in this just to try to save lives and try to educate people about the crisis that we're in. So that's the story of what we're doing and why we're doing it. In my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but the evidence is clearly overwhelming, and they're already rolling over on each other, which I love. You know, it's amazing. The finger pointing has started before they even get in the room for the deposition. And so I think it's going to be successful. It won't be fast. These things take time. They have so much money. It's incredible. And so they'll fight it and fight it and fight it until the end. So it could take 5-7 years. But it's very similar to Big Tobacco lawsuit. And the Big Tobacco people paid, and they continue to pay every day. And I think actually this is even, in my opinion, this is even worse because people are dying every single day. And it's just amazing to me that we just still haven't been able to get our arms around it. So you guys are all health people and law enforcement people and town leaders. And at the end of the day, I think we all have a responsibility to the people that we serve to do everything we can to try to make a difference here. And it's, you know, it's really what I think each of us are probably all about, and that's probably why you're sitting here. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to be a part of it. You know, our fight will continue, and if you go back to your individual towns and they haven't heard about this lawsuit, they're more than welcome to join it. They can just call my office. Right now, I think we have 22 or 24 towns signed up. We have Bridgeport, Waterbury are the two biggest. Some cities have initiated lawsuits after our lawsuit, but they've chosen to go with different attorneys. Once, lawyers are fun to deal with too, right? So once the big firms across the nation hear about our lawsuit now, I've gotten about 5 different calls from major firms across the land who say, "Oh, Neil, we can do it for a lot less, and why don't you come with us and take your 17 or 20 towns and come." It's just amazing. But at the end of the day, it really is a good thing because it doesn't really matter what law firm is representing what town or group of towns. What matters most is the pressure will continue to grow on Big Pharma, and hopefully sooner or later we'll see some positive results in what we're trying to accomplish. So thanks, you guys. I don't want to talk too much. I know you've only got a couple hours here, and it's been a pleasure to meet most of you already, and I'm going to hang around, as long as I can. And thanks. Have a good morning.
Thank you very much. I definitely encourage you, go back, talk to your towns about this, see if they're involved, and contact Mayor O'Leary's office if you're interested. One comment that the mayor made was a lot of this is grassroots stuff. We can't count on the federal government right now. We're lucky in the health field to be able to count on our Department of Public Health at the state. I think we have some representatives here today. Our commissioners, he sends his regrets that he couldn't make it today, but he knows about our subcommittee, and he's trying to give us as many resources as we need. So we do want to thank the Department of Public Health also. So our next speaker, and from the health side of it, we know the behavioral health aspects of it, we know the prevention side of it, but a lot of us don't really know the drug trade background. So we were able to bring in Bob Lawler. He's a drug intelligence officer as part of the high intensity drug trafficking area, and I'll let him explain that.
Thank you. Where's the mouse? Oh. Morning, everybody. My name is Bob Lawler. I am the Drug Intelligence Officer for Connecticut for New England HIDTA, which is the high-intensity drug trafficking areas. I am a former New Haven police sergeant, and I'm going to go over a little bit about a high level, what's going on in the region, what trends we're seeing, and what some of the major issues are in the region. The chief is going to get up after me and talk more about what's going on specifically in Waterbury and on a local level. Before I start, I wanted to thank the mayor, and the mayor is 100% right in a lot of what he says. And one of the things that I don't understand is, why is Big Pharma teaching doctors? Why isn't the medical community teaching them themselves? But I don't know. I guess it's because where the money is, and it's. We got to do something about that. It's the reason why they're the #1 lobbying firm in the country, Big Pharma. So HIDTA, for those that don't know, I know I've recognized a lot of people in the audience, but it stands for the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. It was started by Congress in 1988 through the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. It's funded through the Office of National Drug Control Policy. It provided, when it first started, it was at the height of the crack epidemic. And violence associated with the crack epidemic was a major issue. And cocaine was just pouring over into the United States from the southwest border, through Miami, through New York. It was a major issue. So the government said, we need to do something to help the federal government and the DEA, FBI work with your local departments and your tribal departments and your state departments to try and work together to target the areas that will best choke off the drug trade and disrupt drug trafficking organizations in each area of the country. And that was really the purpose. But like Shane said, at some point, all good organizations need to change, and we need to realize that things in life change, the way people work change and attitudes change. And law enforcement, a number of years ago, began realizing, okay, this opioid epidemic is bad. We can't solve the problem as police officers alone. We need assistance. We need other avenues to try and help these people and try and deal with this. A lot of HIDA directors throughout the country realized this, and they got together and they formed the HIDA response strategy. And what that was designed to do was to try and get law enforcement working with public health all across the country, but specifically in the areas hardest hit by the heroin issue and the opioid issue. And we were all basically ex-law enforcement. A lot of us didn't know our way around the public health. So HIDA directors, again, in their wisdom, said, okay, we need to partner with somebody who knows about public health to try and guide us in the public health world. And after some high-level meetings with CDC came on as a partner in the heroin response strategy to try and help guide us on the public health side. And with that, they've hired for basically 20 states now. We're in 20 states. We have a drug intelligence officer like myself, who acts like a liaison between police departments, and we have a public health analyst whose job is to analyze data and also try and liaison with public health. Unfortunately, my partner couldn't be here today. She had another meeting, but she does a lot of work with OCME and a lot of the different health organizations in the state. But even though Connecticut's not big, there's only 2 of us. So, it's hard getting out and getting to know everybody and doing all that. So as I said, this is the blueprint of the heroin response strategy. As you can see, it's really the areas that are hardest hit by the opiate epidemic. And if you go back to, like the mayor said, if you look at a map of where the OxyContin epidemic was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it's pretty much the same map. At the end of the year, we're going to be adding 3 more states. We're going to be adding Florida, Indiana, and Kentucky. Illinois. Florida, Indiana, and Illinois. So it's going to go nationwide because we're realizing this is an issue in every state. Even states like Colorado, where a lot of people were thinking, like, let's legalize marijuana, maybe that'll curtail it. Colorado's having a major opioid epidemic also, and they're going to be instituting this program. So, as the mayor alluded to, and a lot of you already know, a lot of this has to do with prescription drugs, and a lot of it started with prescription drugs. And, this isn't the first or second opioid epidemic. This is like it's almost, you can't even count how many other opioid epidemics there are. You got to remember, opioids come from opium. Britain fought 2 wars in the 1800s with China over the opium. So this has been going on basically since the beginning of time, when the Greeks found that opium was a great thing. And 3400 BC was the first recorded, first record of opium being used. And it was an issue back then. It's been an issue ever since. And when heroin was discovered in the late 1800s by Bayer, it was such a problem back then that the United States government enacted the Harrison Act of 1914 and that's really where all our drug laws came into effect back then, that long ago, and we're still having issues with it basically 100 years later. If you could see, and this is a timeline, and you could see the different, heroin is this blue line, and we see a spike here around 2010. And a lot of what happened is, and the mayor alluded to this, and he's absolutely right. We saw heroin in the 70s and early 80s. It was a major issue in a lot of urban areas. But then the AIDS epidemic hit. And because heroin back then was all intravenous and people were dying of AIDS, heroin went away and we got into crack. But drug dealers and drug cartels are not stupid people. They realized that people did not want to inject and use heroin intravenously. So what did they do? While America was getting hooked on OxyContin, they increased the purity of heroin, and they cut the price, and then they flooded our streets with it. And back in 2010, what happened is Purdue Pharma, because they were getting so much pressure, went to the FDA and they said, hey, we've created a new tamper-resistant formula for OxyContin. And the FDA extended their patent protection, which was about to expire, and allowed them to produce this new tamper-resistant OxyContin. And as it came out of the supply chain, what we saw is a lot of people that were addicted to OxyContin moved to heroin. And those were on top of the people who were moving to heroin because it was cheaper. And back then, an 80 of OxyContin would cost you about $80, where you can get the same high for about 30 bucks worth of heroin. So you could buy a bundle of heroin for 60 bucks and get 2 to 3 hits of your equivalent to OxyContin. So it was also economical. That switched us to heroin. And this is something most people know, that 3 out of 4 report that they started using heroin because they were abusing prescription drugs. And this is just a simple kind of like pathway to how a lot of heroin use starts. It starts with the prescription drugs, whether it's, a friend has them and you use them, or you prescribe prescription drugs and you overuse them. And then you just end up abusing them to the point where you're addicted. But what we're seeing now is really disturbing. And what bothers me is we've been in this crisis for a while. We're all talking about it. I've probably done about 3 dozen, if not more, presentations, lectures, meetings, forums, all from this level, or at Blumenthal or Murphy, or larger people. And to address this issue, everybody has Narcan, everybody knows about this issue. We can't get a hold on the deaths. The deaths keep on increasing. And while they're not increasing at the rate they were from 2014 to 2015, they're still going up. We're on that's a bad word. But we're on pace to lose 1,100 lives here in Connecticut this year. That's astounding. And the amount of people we're saving from Narcan, if we didn't have Narcan, I don't know what the number would be. I speak to a lot of fire departments and health people, and it's hard to gauge, for how many people that we have a fatal overdose, how many overdoses do we have? And that's one of the things we're looking at to try and get a handle on in Connecticut, is actually how many overdoses, non-fatal overdoses, do we have? A lot of people put the number at like 6 or 7 to 1, which would mean on average a year we have like 6,000 to 7,000 or more non-fatal overdoses. And that's all a strain on everybody's budget, everybody's resources. And yes, they're alive, but how quality is that life, and how destructive is that life to their family? And just the damage it's doing to the families, even for the people that aren't fatally overdosing, is incredible, and something that doesn't really get a lot of discussion in this epidemic, because we're just trying to get a handle on the deaths. And I don't know when it's going to stop. The analogs, which I'll get into in a minute, that are coming in from China and Mexico are scary, and they're a lot different than just the heroin we're used to. Even back in 2015 and 2014, the heroin that we were seeing back then and what the kids and users are using today is totally different. But these are some reasons for the increase in fatal overdoses: a higher purity, it could be smoked or snorted, prescription drugs are harder to find, dosage of unknown due to unknown purities and adulterants, the fentanyl, its analogs, these research chemicals like U4770 or W18. Also, a major concern is people just out of rehab or people just out of DOC custody. They go back to using shortly after they get out to the same exact level they were using before they went in, but now their opioid tolerance is so low that it causes them to overdose. And counterfeit pills, which is a major issue I'm going to get into in another moment or two. So my counterpart, Kelsey, she does a lot of the data, so I'm not really too versed in this part. But what I did want to show you is, if you look back to the first one is 2014, it's January of 2014, and the red, so the blue is the number of deaths for all opioids, and the red is the percentage that was fentanyl. Now look at December of 2016. You know, we went from, you know, mid-20s% of all the opioid deaths in Connecticut were fentanyl to 78 to 80% of all opioid deaths in Connecticut are from fentanyl. And that number is going to increase this year. There's towns where every single overdose in that town is all from fentanyl. Increases in opioid and opioid-related deaths are not only from prescription pills, but they're from heroin and fentanyl analogs. These are a few statistics, and some of the different fentanyl and acetafentanyl analogs we're seeing in Connecticut. There's another way we use the HIDA network is to talk among each other to see trends. And one of the things we try and do is when we see something is to get it out. So law enforcement, so the public health, they know what's coming. So if, you know, they're seeing some kind of new chemical compound in New York or in Rhode Island, we can let people know in Connecticut so they're prepared for it and they know what's on the horizon. Why fentanyl and why are we moving to analogs? And it's a lower cost, it's a higher profit, it can be cut into heroin, can be sold in place of heroin, it's synthetically created. And that's a big issue. So when we're talking about synthetically created, we're not talking, you know, heroin typically comes from the opioid plant. It has to be farmed. You need people to farm it. You need people to care about it. You have weather patterns you have to worry about. You need land to farm it. And then you have to process it down to heroin. Well, that all takes time and it all takes people. Fentanyl, W18, U4770, it's a production cycle in a super lab. So in 12 or 24 hours, they can spit out metric tons of it. And it's cheap. You know, generally speaking, a kilo of heroin is about, you know, $60,000, $65,000, somewhere in that range, depending on where you are and your connection and your history, and how pure the kilo is. A kilo of fentanyl is $4,000 or less on the dark web. So right there, you're saving $56,000. And then you can almost 10 times your profit level from the kilo of fentanyl than you can from the kilo of heroin. So these are confirmed fentanyl analogs in Connecticut, and this is a little data. This is from like 6 months ago. We were waiting for new analogs from the lab and from OCME to update this. But these are some of the analogs that are in Connecticut. So these have all been confirmed through either the forensic lab that does the testing for the police departments or from the Office of Chief Medical Examiner that they found in fatal overdoses in the bodies. So these are some crazy fentanyl analogs that are on our streets. They're dangerous. They're dangerous to the user. They're dangerous to first responders. They're dangerous to, you know, residents of wherever the drug-dependent person lives. You know, you have something like carfentanil in your house and you have small kids. That's an issue, and that's something we all need to be aware of. So we talked about the cost a little bit. So 1 kilo of fentanyl is about $4,000. Kilo of heroin, like I said, is ballpark 60 grand. So what we're seeing now is a move towards counterfeit pills. So on the dark net, you can buy a pill press for $1,200. You can buy a set of pill dyes for $300. You could buy cutting agents for about $350. So you're gonna spend about $5,800, $5,850. But you gotta remember something, $1,500 of that you're only spending once. You're only buying the pill press once, and you're only buying a set of dyes once unless you wanna change up what pill you're pressing. So, you know, each month you're spending about, you know, $4,300. This is conservative. You're gonna make a $1.5 million off this $5,000 investment. That is the reason why we're seeing fentanyl here on the streets of Connecticut. It's all about profit. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, don't people care that they're killing their clients? It's not that they care or don't care. They only care about money. So, and the other thing too is, unfortunately, and I think we all know this, is when there's overdose deaths or overdose incidents, it drives people to look for that product because they're always chasing that high. They're always chasing that borderline death high. So when there's a spike and it's attributed to, you know, the ABC stamp or the Rolex stamp or whatever the stamp is that is being sold on the streets of Connecticut, or it's, you know, some guy selling Roxy 30s that are really fentanyl pills in New London, it drives people to that, to chase that high. So there's just a little conversion. So where is this coming from? So we see fentanyl coming from basically two different places. It all originates in China. China's sending precursors to Mexico, and Mexico is finalizing it in super labs. Everything coming over the southwest border into the United States is just fentanyl. Customs and Border Protection and DEA has not seized any fentanyl analogs coming through traditional smuggling routes through the southwest border. It's just fentanyl at about 8% purity. That's what they're seizing, and that's what's coming into the country that way. Every fentanyl analog that ends up on the streets of whether it's Connecticut or Ohio or Maine or New Hampshire is coming from China through parcel services. And it's basically your UPSs, your FedExes, and your Postal Service. China's sending it through the Amazon of China to the United States, and it comes into either Chicago, LA, or JFK, and then from there it goes to a distributor and sent out through one of the parcel services. And when talking to Customs and Border Protection, I've asked, well, can't you just earmark that company, like we're gonna interdict any package that comes from ABC in China? And they're like, Bob, no, you don't understand. That company that's sending all that stuff, they're basically one of the larger senders of stuff in China. They're also sending all your lawn furniture to Walmart, all your knickknacks to the local bodegas. Anything that's made in China coming to the United States, these guys are also shipping. So it's mixed in with all those packages. So that's one of the reasons why Customs and Border Protection is having an issue trying to interdict a lot of the stuff that's coming into the United States. And then also, these guys aren't dumb. They know, especially if they're using Postal or FedEx, everything's online. Any hiccup in the track of the package, they're not accepting it. They're not going to pick it up. And that causes issues for law enforcement. So one of the things I had mentioned is counterfeit pills. And the major issue, talking to DEA, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and most of the drug task forces in Connecticut and around the region, that we're seeing as the major issue is counterfeit pills. And when I say counterfeit pills, what I mean is not pills produced by Purdue Pharma or some other pharmacy that are being diverted somewhere along the supply chain. What we're talking about are pills that are produced by some guy in his basement or in some super lab that contain no other thing than fentanyl or some fentanyl analog, some binder, and some cutting agents just to make a pill. And as you can see, it looks pretty decent. If you're buying pills illegally on the street, are you really going to think that's not a real pill, looking at the counterfeit one? And the other thing too is these guys talk to each other. So these photos are a little old. These guys go on blog sites like your Earwid and your Reddit, and they talk to each other. And they learn how to make the pill look better, make the color look crisper, make the scores look better, make the imprint last longer by adding different chemicals and different cutting agents to the pill. So that it's harder for law enforcement to realize that that's a fentanyl pill and not a regular Xanax. This is this is the #1 issue in Connecticut. These pills right here, Roxy 30s, really they're 30 milligram oxycodone. These are what we see as the major issue right now in Connecticut. The DEA and the statewide narcotics have seized thousands upon thousands of these pills in Connecticut already. Here's some Percocets that are counterfeit. As you can see, like in the counterfeit one, the color isn't great, but I mean, it looks pretty good. I would never know what the color of a Percocet 30 was, a Percocet 10 milligram. This is Connecticut. So this isn't China, this isn't New York, this isn't, Lowell, Mass, or Boston, Mass, or, Chicago. This was seized by DEA in Connecticut this summer. That is 75,000 counterfeit Xanax pills in that Tupperware thing. 75,000, and that's just what the guy had on him when DEA kicked in the door. That's a pill press next to him. So this stuff is here. And one of the things we have to realize as law enforcement and just a community is the way we traditionally thought about the drug trade, even 2 to 3 years ago, has totally changed. The internet and the dark web have made it possible for anybody to go on the internet and have drugs sent to their house in a little brown box that looks like you ordered potato chips from Amazon. It's really that simple. And we have cases right now in Connecticut where there are dark web vendors who have been identified and arrested here in Connecticut that have been tied to some of the fatal overdoses here in Connecticut. And so what they're doing is they're ordering drugs from China through the internet, through the dark web, and then reselling them through the dark web from their home or residence in Connecticut. So it's not the guy on the corner anymore or the guy meeting in the McDonald's parking lot and doing a quick hand-to-hand and using the phones. A lot of this stuff we're seeing now is moving towards dark web transactions using encrypted currency like Bitcoin or one of the other ones to sell this stuff. And a lot of it's anonymous. Nobody knows who each other is. It's hard for law enforcement to, because of the way the dark web is set up and the way it relays through the different nodes out from one end back into another, it's hard for law enforcement to identify exactly who these people are. And that's what we're seeing. The game has changed on a macro level. There are still some, you still see the drug deals at your local parking lot, car to car, guys going to the people they know and selling it face to face. But we're starting to see a shift. These are just some more pill presses seized in Connecticut by DEA. Sorry the picture's a little fuzzy. That's the best DEA had. But that's the pill dye for the Roxy 30. That was seized. That was in that first pill press. The second page of pill presses. So the guy who had that pill press was making Roxy 30s here in Connecticut. The other thing we need to highlight is first responder exposures. There's been some major discrepancies among medical professionals and law enforcement about the actual danger to first responders about getting an accidental exposure. However, with that said, I still think we need to be cautious, and as first responders or people dealing with these situations, at minimum use some personal protective equipment to protect yourself. I will tell you, we just found out that a Madison canine doing a narcotics stop with its handler, was exposed to fentanyl, had an overdose reaction. They rushed it to the veterinarian hospital up in that part of the state. Blood work came back this week. Cocaine, fentanyl, and heroin in the dog's blood system from doing its job. And, you know, well, we're probably all animal lovers and we don't want to see anything happen to the animal. Luckily, the animal survived and it's okay. Took 3 rounds of Narcan through IV at the animal hospital. But that could have been the officer or another officer searching that car. And we have had incidents in Connecticut, two different incidents, I believe, in Watertown where officers were exposed. We had the Hartford SWAT team go into a house, you know, a high-risk warrant. They used flashbangs. Throwing the flashbangs in the house, you know, there was fentanyl and heroin on the table. It aerolized it, and they all inhaled it. They all had an overdose exposure, all had to go to the hospital and get treated. Thankfully, we've been lucky here in Connecticut. Nobody's died. Nobody's been seriously injured. But we've had exposures. Even firefighters in Canada, they were exposed. Paramedics in Hartford County, Maryland, were exposed recently. I mean, and I look at it as, you know, as a former law enforcement guy, we're pretty horrible. We'll stick our bare hands in anything and, you know, and just grab it. But usually paramedics and firefighters, they're wearing PPE like it's second nature, like they breathe. They're throwing on gloves and all that stuff. And for them to get exposed and have these incidents is kind of scary to me as a law enforcement person. Like, you know, I know we're pretty bad with it, and I've been trying to beat the drum to police chiefs and departments about, you know, we got to try and get guys to, when they can, it's not always easy. Sometimes you got to chase the guy and wrestle with the guy before you can get him under control. But as soon as possible, get that PPE on so you protect yourself a little bit. But medical first responders, your EMS, your paramedics, your firefighters, it's like second nature to those guys. So them getting exposed is worrisome. These are just some safety considerations. These are guidelines from DEA and OSHA about personal protective equipment, dark color and nitrile gloves, long sleeve shirts, N95 masks, safety glasses. Think about decontamination when you leave a scene. They say the dark gloves because usually fentanyl and the analog powders are white. So if you have the dark gloves on, you'll be able to see it easy. And then the N95 mask, you know, it's just so if it's aerolized, it helps. Information sharing is one of the things we're trying to push is, you know, get police departments talking, get, you know, EMS talking with first responders, all that stuff. And the reason is so everybody knows what's going on in Connecticut. You know, so if there is a new crazy analog, your local hospital is prepared. They know. You know, if we're seeing car fentanyl that takes 3 or 4 Narcan hits to bring a person back on the streets of, you know, let's say New Haven, Yale should know that, so they know that they need to stock extra. Because I remember in 2016 when New Haven had the overdose issue, they had 20 overdoses in like 6 hours and 3 people fatally died. The New Haven Fire Department and Yale actually ran out of Narcan because that's how many people there were. Like New Haven sent people, lights and sirens, to another hospital to get more Narcan for everybody. So there's issues like that need to be addressed, and that's where some of the open lines of communication come in. We're always looking for information, you know, whatever anybody can, you know, give us to try and get the word out, you know, whatever crazy analogs they're seeing, whatever drugs might be emerging. There's a discussion on a national level now that, okay, we've missed signs with the opioid epidemic. We should have seen this coming and been more prepared. Let's look at what else can be coming down the road. Are there other things that, you know, are we missing signs and we need to look at? And I can tell you that one of those things we're talking about is, on a national level, is stimulants. Are we going to have a stimulant epidemic because of the overprescription of Adderall and Ritalin? And I could tell you from some of the seizure data I'm seeing on a nationwide level and regionally, yeah, more than likely because cocaine seizures are back up, crack seizures are back up, meth seizures are back up. So those are all stimulants, and they're all increasing in seizures across the country and in the region. That's my contact information. Did you want to leave questions for the end? Yeah. Okay, we'll do questions at the end.
Thanks. Before I introduce the next speaker, I think one of the important things we're seeing today is a lot of this stuff is going to be grassroots. It's going to be up to us. Everybody wants to be part of this solution. Everybody's working on it. I think locally we need to be able to have the meetings as public health professionals, have it with the police, fire, elected officials, EMS, see what we could do together rather than trying to duplicate effort, try to get as much information as possible. One of the things that we've been talking about is all this data. The data is great. We're seeing a lot of data about deaths in Connecticut. But as Dave Knopf from the co-chair of the CADH subcommittee has been pushing for it, we need live data. So something like reportable diseases. As director of health, there's roughly 60 diseases that if you get, myself and the state will know about it within a week. Okay, it's everything from sexually transmitted diseases, foodborne illnesses, to any of the diseases associated with bioterrorism. We get this every day. We don't get data on overdoses, whether it be someone who passed away or even more importantly for us right now, people who lived, people who were saved with Narcan. Let us start seeing some trends as far as who's using, where they're using, and maybe we can start combating it that way. So it's going to be certainly something we're going to try and push. Our next speaker, I want to introduce Deputy Chief Spagnola from the Waterbury Police Department. Waterbury's having a great approach to this, getting everybody involved, and there's some really innovative approaches that the police department's taken. Thanks, Fred.
Good morning, everyone. Fred Spagnuolo, I'm the Deputy Police Chief here in Waterbury. I've been in this position for about 6 years. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time in Vice and Narcotics Division. Majority of my career working narcotics cases and dealing with this issue. And as we've heard over and over again from the mayor and from Bob, I mean, this is a long-term issue that we've been dealing with nearly 2 decades. The opioid epidemic has really been impacting us, and we just see it grow to a point to where it's really out of hand now. And it's going to take a lot of collaboration. It's not, we can't, as you heard earlier, we can't arrest our way out of it. We can't treat our way out of it. We're going to have to all work together and think out of the box and continue to come up with different solutions and collect the information needed. What we see here in Waterbury for a trend, you've heard a lot about already this morning. We run it from the gamut from high school kids that have injuries playing sports that get prescribed opioid medication to help with their treatment, to factory workers. We have a large manufacturing base here in the city. Workers getting injured and getting overprescribed opioids, getting cut off at a certain situation and not having the proper assistance or help available for them to deal with this addiction that they have, and then turning to illegal means to feed that addiction. We still see the number one issue here in Waterbury for us are people snorting bags of heroin. However they started, whether they started from a prescription base or they got involved because of peer pressure or friends at more of an adolescent level. We see both occurring. Our detectives from the Vice Squad interview every opioid user that we come in contact with or family of an overdosed opioid user to extent. And we try to collect as much information we can about this person's patterns and conditions and what really drove them into the situation where they became so addictive and to the point to where they overdosed. And it's devastating. We see the ripple effect quite often. We see how it tears apart the families. We see the larcenies that occur within a family. We see a lot of things that, as the mayor pointed out earlier, people don't report because of embarrassment. That's why we felt it was important on our most recent venture with these drop boxes. We also now offer public or at-home collection of opioid prescribed drugs for homebound or elderly people. We felt that was very important. I mean, we know that opioids are continuing to be overprescribed all throughout the country. We know that they're overprescribed here in Waterbury, and we felt it was important when people were done with them, we're not going to use them, to get them out of their house. You know, we've seen many, many cases where, you know, home health aides or younger family members that have addiction issues that the rest of the family didn't know about would go into a grandparent's home or an elderly person's home and take this medication and end up overdosing, and in some cases it would be a fatality. So it was important to us to offer that service for people. Here in Waterbury, we collaborate a lot. There are daily meetings between our vice detectives, the fire department, Adam Renko, the health department folks. We got Cindy Vitone here, Dr. Quinn. We're communicating on a daily basis to make sure that we share as much information as we can about these overdose calls and these medical calls that we've gone to. We've created programs in our records management system to capture more data, so we can identify and distinctly, when we respond, whether it's EMS, fire, or the police department, to an opioid-related incident. And then we know we can delve into it a little deeper and find out more information about it. Hopefully reach out to the family if they're cooperative and try to get more information from them. These are all really important things because I think, as Shane pointed out, it's all about the data. You know, we really need to work together and share the information so we can keep up with the trend. And the trend is worse than technology with opioids now, with the synthetics out there, as Bob pointed out. I have an extreme concern for my officers, and recently I've ordered them now, so when we seize opioids, we have to test them on a street level, and then they've been sent to the lab later. But we use that testing process to establish probable cause oftentimes in an arrest. My officers are now directed that they have to be 2 of them when they do this testing process, and 1 of them has to be supplied with Narcan. You know, because God forbid, I don't want one of these guys or girls getting affected or exposed to one of these fentanyls or, you know, even heroin itself, opium in its raw form, and having an overdose issue or some type of exposure issue. You know, this is really important stuff, folks. And I think that, I don't know what you all do in your towns, but I think it's really important that you have meetings. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, where we bring everybody to the table. We bring in the nonprofits, we bring in members of the health department, the police and fire department, and we meet very, very frequently, and we talk about issues with education, just getting the word out there, and trends that we're seeing on the street, and the amount of Narcan use. We're finding here in Waterbury that oftentimes when we respond to an overdose situation, just 1 dose of Narcan doesn't cut it anymore. You know, and I think a lot of that is impacted by all the analog opioids and synthetic opioids that are now available out there. So it's important for us to understand that and know that, and get the information to the first responders and the hospitals and the EMS people that are going to be dealing with the situation. Another thing that we've noticed as we track our trends here is that we have a pretty aggressive Narcan distribution to family members who are bold enough to come forward and talk to public health people and their doctors and EMS people about addiction issues within their family. We're finding now that in many cases, you know, we have documented that lives have been saved here in Waterbury because there is Narcan within the household and the family members administering it as they call 911. That has been very helpful for us, so it's something for you to think about in your jurisdictions as you go back and talk more about this. You know, it's all about collaboration, folks. That's really what I got to say. You've heard a lot about what Bob talked about as far as the trends at HIDA, and what they're doing at HIDA is what we model ourselves here in Waterbury after. You know, we work transparently with everybody. We share as much information as we can. We're all available for you all if you ever want to, you know, come in and talk to us about anything, or come see what's going on, you know, as far as our system goes, or how we investigate things, or take a look at our stats. And that's really all I have to offer. So I appreciate the time this morning, and I look forward to hearing more.
Thanks, Chief. So our next speaker is Adam Renko. A lot of the stuff that we talked about today as far as the collaboration, the data, Adam's going to go through what Waterbury is doing as a city, as far as data gathering, as far as their approaches for public education and everything. It's a really comprehensive program, and I'll turn it over to Adam as soon as he gets his technical issues dealt with. Thanks.
Morning, everybody. All right, so what I'm going to talk to you a little bit to you about today is the response strategies that we've done, particularly here in Waterbury. I think what Deputy Chief Spagnola alluded to is that it's a really, really big collaborative effort here. We've been able to somehow figure out, and it's not just been through luck. We kind of do this on most things. We kind of took this, and as Shannon mentioned, I'm also collaterally from the fire department. I'm also the director of emergency management for the city. And we kind of took it as just like we would any other disaster or any other crisis that we worked on. This is treated like a blizzard. It's treated like a hurricane. Police have their role, fire has its role, EMS has its role, public health has its role. And what we do is we overlap those roles to ensure that we get everything covered. And quite frankly, it's been a lot of work. Since last June, I've been signed collaterally over to the health department. Thanks to Fire Chief Dave Martin allowing that, I really do appreciate it, and I think they do as well. If I tell him one more time that I'm working on opioids today, I think he's going to kill me. But I've spent quite a bit of time doing this since then. So what we have today is a couple programs, and of those 3 Narcan saves that we had in the last 24 hours, one of those was a family Narcan, and it was a mother to a son in one of our more affluent neighborhoods. It was not this is not some back alley somewhere. This is one-on-one. It is me and you. It is everybody we know happening. So that's, believe it or not, kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. It is a bit of good news that families are starting to participate in this, and that it's just not waiting for 911. It's just not waiting for fire or EMS to get there or police to get there with Narcan to try to save them. So the word is getting out. And, just as a precursor, I want everybody to understand, is Ledgelight Health District here? Ledgelight. So two ends of the spectrum on the core grant, which I think you're all familiar with. You have Waterbury, which is heavily on the response side. So what we're talking about today in programs are response programs. Ledgelight, which is New London districts, are heavily on the prevention side. So they've taken their core grant and they've gone towards the prevention side of it, which is where Waterbury will most likely move towards next. But so what we're going to talk today a lot is about the response side, and what generally our feeling is that what we want to do is get everybody to live another day. If we can get them alive, keep them alive for another day, at least we can somehow try to get them near treatment. And really, the public education for Narcan has been a big part of that. So you got a pretty thick handout about our efforts to date in your packages. So, and that's basically a recap from our health department on the core grant. So there's a lot of stuff in there. But what I really like to just focus on is quite frankly, is the collaborative effort that we've used. And we do meet on this a lot. So we've done advertising. We have billboards coming out. We're doing public education to people anybody that feels from their organization that they're in a position where they may need to use Narcan. And this includes our local homeless shelters. Believe it or not, drug intake programs don't have Narcan training. It's just not a requirement. Detox centers don't have Narcan training across the board. Now, granted, a lot of these places have clinical staff that obviously are trained. They have nurses, doctors that work there. But the actual day-to-day counseling staff and non-traditional providers, so that would be people who aren't doctors or nurses, don't have any really real experience. So what we're doing is we're meeting with a lot of people on the treatment side of addiction. So your social workers, your psychologists, your certified drug counselors, and that's really who we're training now. And in Captain Jim Burns is here from our training division. He's been out doing most of these with me, and we actually had our first mixed group. So we had, not only did we have providers, we actually had clients. It was kind of a surprise to me, and I hadn't really done it, so I was a little hesitant about it. But I got to be honest with you, the information that we got back in an exchange was phenomenal, and the clientele themselves are really looking to help themselves. So providing this is a huge part of it. We've done, obviously, Chief Spagnola talked about our collection programs. Collection programs are huge, This starts in everybody's medicine cabinet. That's where it comes from. That's what we see every single day. Every single overdose in this city that the fire department responds to comes through my office. Pretty much every morning, the chief's staff meets, we talk about it, and we look at what happened the night before. And we look at our trends, and it's pretty much the same old story every time, unfortunately. Whether it was a sports injury or whether it was a psychological issue that led to addiction is debatable. But it almost always started with a prescription pill. And it almost always now on the death side of it is ending up with fentanyl. And some sort of, usually unbeknownst to the user. Obviously we have a coordinated team effort here. We treat this, like I said, like any other emergency. I mean, we're approaching this as we would anything that had to do with public safety. We put together our health department, we put together our police department, we put together our fire department, EMS, hospitals. Everybody meets on it. And everybody has been assigned their piece. So having and building a task force within your town, it's not that tough. The coordination piece is usually the toughest piece that we've seen. We're fortunate here that we do have a health department that is centric to its own. So we're not a district, so we're not dealing with multiple agencies, and I know that can be a significant problem for some of the directors here because you are dealing with multiple agencies, so that means you end up dealing with multiple EMS, multiple police departments, and getting them all on the same page is it can be difficult. I'm well aware. As I go around the state and I've been to the state core grant meetings and everything like that, it's some of the issues that we continue to hear, and I will say it is much easier for the CEOs in the room and the town managers and the folks that are essentially in charge of their towns. Getting behind your people is number one. When you show this as a support, they'll follow. It's exactly what happened here in Waterbury. Is it became an issue. We have support from the top down, and everybody seems to fall in line from that. It makes it extremely easy. We take a multidisciplinary approach. We don't try to cover it all. The health department doesn't try to talk about arrests, or they don't even try to talk about pre-hospital care. They talk about prevention, and they talk about statistics, what they're good at. Everybody in this, in this room has been through probably most likely an infectious disease cycle, whether it be, range from HIV/AIDS to flu. But the same strategies you use to combat that is going to be the same strategies you can use to combat that. From the fire side and fire and EMS side, we don't do that. Patients generally with us last about 5 minutes, and there's no follow-through. So just keeping them alive is really what they're focused on. So we don't focus on statistics. We don't focus on that. We can help in that. We can give you data, and we can do anything you need, but focusing and pivoting around the health department is essential. when we involve all these people, obviously the more people talking about an issue is the more people talking about an issue. You know, we have everybody talking about this. We have everybody. We keep hosting these meetings. We keep, you know, whenever we can, we put it out there, and it becomes an essential part. You know, we have, you know, about 250, I think about, Chief, about 270 police officers now? Yeah, about 270 police officers. We have 220 firefighters in the city, and they're all dealing with this on a daily basis. So all those people combined fighting this. And then we gotta have a health staff. And then we have a hospital staff of thousands that are dealing with this. We all need to get on the same page. You know, how and why it works here in Waterbury? You know, I don't know why it works so well. I would venture a guess, and when we looked at most of this, is that, again, we've gone through other emergencies together. We all know each other very well. And we established practices a long time ago that said that we were going to sit and meet about an emergency prior to the emergency happening or during the emergency, and we were going to continue to collaborate. You know, our staff's equivalents, so the same guy who does the same thing for the police department as administrative level usually meets with the same guy from the fire department that does the same thing on an administrative level on a regular basis. And their equivalent in the health department meets in that meeting. And then, you know, the chiefs all meet on a regular basis. So everybody in their counterpart is interacting on a daily basis to try to get to some sort of consensus on what a strategy will be. So everybody's little piece is covered. Everybody's little, you know, whatever their little thing that they do in their own organization as it relates to opiates is being handled. Why the emphasis on Narcan? Again, you know what? From our point of view, it's the only discernible statistic that we have right now for an indicator for opioid use. If you got Narcan and you came back from whatever state you were in, you had opioids in your system. It doesn't work on anything else. That means that is definitive proof that we have an opioid user there. So as we're tracking these statistics, it's really the base level on where we get on how we're doing, or how we're not doing, unfortunately, in some cases. But that's why we use Narcan as the tracking statistic. You know, it's consistently regulated on each use. So when you have Narcan usage, who's ever giving it, outside of family members and obviously lay responders, they have to document it. So somewhere in every single one of your towns, I guarantee you, if a police officer, a firefighter, or someone from EMS gave Narcan, there is some sort of paper trail that follows that. You know, as the chief alluded to, we simply adjusted our data systems to collect that. So, for example, in the fire department, we respond to roughly 19,000 calls per year. About 70% of that, Chief, is EMS related. So we have a reporting system that we use as a computer, generates a computer report, and we do a run on each one of those. Right now, our firefighters can't close out that report without indicating whether they used Narcan or the call was an opiate call. So we know every single run consistently whether it's an opiate call. You know, it makes it that much easier when you involve your providers. Now, we have multiple stations, obviously multiple companies, so it's a little bit different for us. And you know what, with that kind of runs, the work is being divided up. So quite frankly, you know, when you go to a smaller town and when you're asking the responders, you know, I'm sure you hear moans and groans about additional paperwork. You know, it's never popular, especially in the field. But we're really only asking for one more thing, and how many calls per day are you really producing this on? You know, and when you break it down daily, by shift, by hour, it's almost infinitesimal. So it's really not asking a lot to collect this data. And this data, statewide, I believe they're working on a statewide map to start mapping this data. It's going to become essential to what everybody has been asking here is, I don't want death data anymore, I want life data. And the life data is going to drive where we send our resources. You know, I can't tell you how many times, meeting after meeting, don't tell me how many people have died. Tell me how many people are living. And that's really what the health services are looking for. You know, with this data, I can tell you, it's extremely difficult to trend. We've looked at our data. We've tried to trend it. You know, we've got some great Excel guys in my office, and we've trended it. We've graphed it. We've looked at it. And about the only thing we can do is we can geographically tell you where people tend to die more than not. Their walk of life, it's all over the board. It's everybody. Our patients range from 79 years old was our max. We had four at 79 years old OD in the last year, down to 6 months. So we don't have really the atypical or some sort of stereotypical Narcan receiver in the city of Waterbury. It could be anyone. We're prepared, you know, and obviously we've been there. And just for a point, when we do average everything out, it's about 43 years old is our average overdose age. So that's on the higher side of the national average, or the older side, I should say, of the national average of being somewhere in the 30-year-old range. We're also a lot heavier on, this year, comparatively to last, we're a lot heavier on males. We're about 70% to 30%, which I believe is now coming in line with the national trend. However, prior to this previous year, we were about 50-50. So we're 50% male, 50% female. So, but the age rates have actually stayed the same over the last 3 years. So we're seeing some you know, our trends are coming closer to the national. But again, you know, what we see with this older group is it would tend to lead you to, you know, anecdotally at least, that most of this is prescription related. All right? This is not starting from just other drugs or gateway drugs. It's mostly prescription related. So if you guys want to refer to your program manual, I just want to talk to you about this for a few minutes. And this is kind of the crux of what we've been working on here in Waterbury, to give you a takeaway, at least for the meeting. All right. So if you take it to your program manual and you take a look, you're divided up into sections here of what the different things you can use this for. And first thing we're going to give you is, I think everybody got a USB attached to theirs. If you didn't, make sure you get one on your way out. The USB device basically has all the files, and those files are customizable by your own jurisdiction. So please take this. I would appreciate, we put a lot of work into this, if you'd give, you know, throw Waterbury a bone. And just and make sure that and we get a little bit of credit for it. I would appreciate that. A lot of people put a lot of time into this. So if you're not a PowerPoint master, the first section that we give you is to how to edit your PowerPoints, okay, and how to actually put in your specific jurisdiction data. All right. We put ours in. You know, we put number of doses of Narcan, deaths. So long, you know, we basically use the medical examiner data. We use some graphics to illustrate how much Narcan we've issued, and, you know, the extremes of this. Most of the stuff is commercially available. CDC has a ton of resources. Cindy, was it rx.com? rxawareness.com from the CDC has a ton of graphics and some of the stuff that we've actually borrowed for our advertising campaign. It's all free domain for you. So if there's anything you want, you can use from there. The next thing what we've done is we actually given you the script. So if you're not a natural speaker, or you know, you don't really have a lot of background knowledge on this firsthand, what we can do is you can actually just literally read off the PowerPoint. We want this out there. We want to teach people how to use Narcan. I don't care if it's boring, but if they learn to use Narcan, it's about saving a life. All right. We've run these presentations 4 times now, and you know, between myself and Captain Burns, there's a lot of interrogatories with the audience, so it kind of draws things out. So even our max is probably 35, 40 minutes with dialogue back and forth on personal experience. So not including personal experience, you'll probably be able to get someone trained out the door about 25 minutes. All right. What we've done is we've gone through all the notes. In our next section, which is here, you'll find what we're doing now is we're taking our resources and we've actually printed them in a foldable pamphlet. And when we have an OD, this program will be essentially the responder is going to take that. That'll go in the person who overdosed pocket. Up until now, we've really been sending them on their way, or we've been leaving families with, hey, give, you know, whatever was suggested by the provider. This is a formalized way to give people the ability to access local resources. These blank forms are in there for you to add your own jurisdiction data. There's some suggestions on where you can get your stuff right from the DEMIS website that you can actually, I literally cut and pasted it right into it. It takes about 2 minutes, and all your local resources are actually, registered local resources can be cut and pasted right into it. It works phenomenally well. We've designed 2 of them. We have the You Have Survived an Opioid Overdose, which is designed for an individual substance abuse disorder, overdose, and it allows them to seek out their own help. And then we've also developed the one which is someone you care about has. And so that's designed for a family member. And you know, obviously we can push the public Narcan, we can push, you know, help, but in the end, treatment is obviously always the best and favorite option. As an aside, just one of the things that was brought up, and I'm going to get us out of here soon, I promise. I know it's been a long morning. But one of the things, the issues that came up at this subcommittee was EMS mandatory transport. And one of the reasons why we do these pamphlets is that in Waterbury, the way we've considered it through our medical control is if you've overdosed and you've currently obviously taken an opiate, if we've just reversed you with Narcan, you don't have the faculty, or you don't have the legal ability to refuse care. So we treat it along the lines of just like any other addiction that we would see. So, for example, for ETOH or alcohol patients that may be exhibiting effects of alcohol, they're not allowed to refuse. It's along the same lines of someone with a head injury. They don't have the right faculty to refuse, so they're not allowed to refuse. And that's actually an abandonment statute that's actually already in and available to your EMS providers. Again, it's a take on how you feel about it. I know, mandatory hospital stays is obviously a much larger issue, but mandatory transport, and the reason why we have that around that is again, for liability issues, obviously. We've given somebody a drug, we want to make sure they're evaluated by a physician. But on the larger level, as an advantage, it gives whoever was just reversed on their overdose some non-clinical resources. So, for example, at St. Mary's Hospital in Waterbury, if someone's transported in on an overdose, the way the flow works is first they're medically cleared, and to make sure that there's obviously nothing that's immediately life-threatening to them. And once they're medically cleared, then they're actually put over to behavioral health, and they have some sort of interaction with a mental health provider. And some of the greatest interactions are the social workers, because a lot of times that becomes a caseworker situation, and someone will, at the very least, attempt to either get them a bed at a facility or some sort of interdiction, or even in the very least cases, they're contacting family and saying, hey, you know what, Joe was here today, he overdosed, and, he has a problem, and they're making sure that the discharge from the hospital is a safe discharge home. That's a huge thing on hospital work right now, is safe discharge home, because of the reoccurring patient cost that they're charged back. So safe discharge home kind of falls hand in hand with this. So we're giving them something to leave with. We're trying to help our hospitals reduce their obviously their ED. Please give everybody a certificate of training. I don't know. There's just something about leaving a training with a certificate in your hand. It just makes it all that much better. We give you a blank one. We also give you our sample of how we did it. We put our logos on it, and we put it sponsored by the fire, police, and health departments. And when you leave there, you got a nice little certificate in your hand that you are trained to use Narcan. And I think it just is a little goodwill gesture for whoever's taking the time, that 25 minutes to learn how to do it. Lastly, we have our practical training. We'll show you afterwards how we do this. Within this manual are actually the contacts for the training companies. I put them right in there. The links are there, so you can actually buy all this stuff. Your core grant, I believe, will pay for it. Remote training items. Yeah, if you are one of the core grant cities, you do have money to pay for this stuff. We found that it's relatively low cost. We actually use expired Narcan as our Narcan training devices. So it's only good for about a year and a half, and we don't turn it over that often. Or there's a lot of places where we issue Narcan. For example, we have administrative units from the fire department all carry Narcan, because you never know where you're going to be a call where you need it. But the idea that they're going to be using it every day just doesn't occur, and some of those do expire within a year. So we take those out of rotation and we use them for training purposes. Captain Burns will also show you how you can actually draw off, and you can actually reuse it and draw off water for simulated training. Those mannequin heads, those are actually the Friends and Family kits from American Red Cross. And they're the cheapest mannequins you can get, but the greatest thing about them is they actually have nostrils. The more expensive mannequins don't have nostrils. And in order to do nasal Narcan, I think we all know we need nostrils. So yeah, it's one of the prerequisites of nasal Narcan. So they're great. They're cheap. You can get them from Channing Bay. The link is right in the program for you, so you can go right to it. I think they're about $75 versus $400 and something for the larger, more sophisticated mannequins. The trainers, it's funny because drug companies are drug companies, and they love to give away free samples. Whether they're solving the opioid crisis or maybe contributing it to it, they'll still give you samples. So trainers are available from both companies, from manufacturers. I reached out to the EpiPen pen trainer. That's the auto injector. You don't see them that often, but we like to train everybody because it obviously is a better alternative to nasal as far as a home use kit. I think clinically it's a much better way to deliver Narcan, but it's for field purposes, it's not that practical. There's a live needle, and the expense. We're talking about probably for us to purchase it commercially, we're talking about a 10-to-1 price ratio on nasal versus auto injector. So obviously we're on nasal. But the company's great. If you call their hotline, they'll send you a bunch of trainers. No problem. I asked for one, they sent me 10. So very, very, very easy. And we're in the process of buying ourselves a prosthetic leg so we can actually show people how to actually inject it behind the As we do it right now, we actually just do it on ourselves. Obviously, there's no needle in the trainer. So that's about it on our program here. It's like I said, you guys can use it for anything you'd like. Take it, please. Really, what we're looking to do is just make sure that everybody gets public access Narcan. You know, again, you know, we're starting to see it here in Waterbury. Both the chief alluded to it. We're coming up on calls, and it's no longer solve an overdose, it's support an overdose. And supporting an overdose is much easier than solving an overdose. You know, as we work together all these angles, I think we're going to see the same exact decline that you saw in HIV and AIDS. That's going to be. It's not going to be overnight. We're not going to find some magic, you know, well, we had, 30 deaths last year, and this year we have none. No, you're going to see the 30, the 20, to 10, to 5, you know? I mean, it's also combined with the beauty of America. We get rather bored with things rather fast. And hopefully, somebody will move on to the next thing. Education in schools, I think, basically looking at everybody on there, there's pretty much a lot of us in here that as children probably didn't wear a seatbelt. We all wear our seatbelts now. It got taught to us along the way, just with the same way of AIDS education, with seatbelt education, with all the injury prevention. And, this thing is smoking, injury prevention is where a lot of this lies. And injury prevention becomes a coordinator of all the different faceted, and even back to the seatbelt, you just got to look at it. We started ticketing people for not wearing them, so you had an enforcement piece. We started teaching everybody in school, you had to wear your seatbelt. Health departments started mixing with DOT funding to do seatbelt education. It's the same thing here. We're mixing with CDC funding now with HIDA training, with law enforcement, with fire, with EMS. So we end up in this situation now where we're just replicating what we've done before. I think we're just going to move to a question. I'm pretty much done right now.
Do you have that Excel spreadsheet in there? Did we give that out?
I did not. What Shane's referring to is we've actually developed a reporting tool for local jurisdictions. But in discussions with the commissioner, they're developing a statewide mapping tool. So depending on how that statewide mapping tool comes out, we have available, if anyone would like to contact me directly, we have an interim tool that you can use to track your data. We've made a few tweaks to it, and obviously, I'm sure it's going to be a question here, so I'll just bring it up now, is the HIP issue. I see everybody smiling, nodding their head. So how do we share information? This probably would have been, I'll just answer it now. So how do we share information and not violate HIPAA? So what we do is we use information that is actually publicly available. So the address of where something occurs is put out on an airwave. Okay, so in whatever town you're in, when you access 911, you basically give up your right to privacy because you're calling and requesting a service there. Now, the details of that call obviously are confidential, whether it be police or fire, domestic violence, or whatever it may be. Those details, but where it happened is not. Okay, so where that fire truck went, where that ambulance went, where that police car went is not confidential. All right? A general age of what was encountered there, it's not confidential. All right? As we all know, HIPAA is when you can identify, a patient, then it becomes a HIPAA violation. But we use such generic data, and we separate the data. So you don't get fire truck so-and-so responded to this address and found a 38-year-old male who, oh, you know, when you put it all together, it becomes one general picture, and obviously that's a HIPAA violation. So we don't do that. But when you ask me how many males have overdosed or what section of the city that have they overdosed, it's now not a violation because we're genericizing it, all right? And pinpointing it, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, health directors are in the chain of custody for providers. So as far as HIPAA goes, correct, Doc? Well, I'm sorry, was it? We are exempt entities. Correct. They're called exempt entities. And being an exempt entity, you can have a conversation with your local EMS about specific calls. You know, you can, you know, if there's a fentanyl call, you want to have a conversation about what the patient outcome with them was, you can actually have that conversation. You don't need permission on that level. Getting that message to EMS, it's a different story. And I see everybody smiling. Because let's be honest with you, we've scared everybody with HIPAA, and you're going to get sued so badly that it's now starting to get obstructive into solving problems. You want to see if anybody has any questions? And Bob's still here, I'm still here. I can answer for pretty much most of the FD stuff.
So if anybody has questions, we have to do the wireless mic since it's being recorded. Raise your hand, I'll come over with the mic and.
My understanding is that when you administer Narcan, and that's been kind of the panacea for reviving people on overdoses, that sometimes an individual can have a violent reaction, or that there might be, it's not that they're happy to be revived from almost dying. So, I mean, I've understood that there can be sometimes people who are actually angry and who are in withdrawal immediately. So could you comment on that? Is there an issue for first responders?
So, prior to coming to the fire department, I spent a number of years in EMS, and so the way Narcan used to be delivered was either IV, and it was obviously a much quicker acting drug, and the reactions could range because it was so fast acting that you had a high, you received the Narcan, and it immediately took away that high, and chemically it could cause a reverse action. Quite frankly, my personal experience, it was more, you would see more vomiting than anything. So angry, fighting, it did occur with the IV Narcan, but with the nasal Narcan, we haven't had, that I'm aware of, we haven't had an instance, or very few instances, where anybody was angry that they took away their high. I gotta be honest with you, yeah, it's more confusion, and it's more, unfortunately, it's more of a deniability. The most common thing I hear is, I wasn't doing drugs. I mean, I got to be honest with you. That's the most common thing that we hear is when you read the reports, and I'm not making light of it. Please understand that. But when you read the reports, the way you write EMS reports is you put things in quotes to identify what the patient said. So from my firefighters, a lot of times what we'll hear is, I wasn't doing drugs. That's what it says in quotes in the report. You read the police report and the same thing. It's obviously put in quotes, and it's victim states, bystander states. I don't know this guy. I'd never seen him before. I didn't, and that's really what it is. It's the deniability and the confusion of what am I doing here? To what Bob said, a lot of people, you got to remember, thought they were taking their regular dose of whatever their choice substance was. So the DOC, people coming out of Department of Corrections, just being off the street for whatever their time of incarceration was, they come back and they're going to take their regular dose of whatever their choice drug was, whether it be a pill, whether it be a bag of heroin, whatever it is. So, and it's really strong. So they're more in disbelief that what they normally do didn't work like it was supposed to than fighting you. So the idea that you're going to have, that I think that's a propagated myth, quite frankly, of, it also goes along with the myth of, having Narcan, and I find this in a lot of towns, trust me, that we talk to, is that having Narcan propagates drug use, which is, if you're here today, most likely you don't believe that.
Hi, Ray Sullivan from Brookfield. I'm one of those nasty prescribers, so perhaps.
Bad person.
I didn't think we let
However-
I didn't think we let doctors in here.
Most of my prescriptions were for cancer, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I want to clarify this issue of Narcan. The main reason why people die during an overdose is because they have respiratory suppression. They're not breathing. And Narcan only reverses the respiratory suppression in the respiratory centers in the brain. It does not wake these people up in a sense that they are still drunk. They are still overdosed. And so all you're doing is reversing the respiratory depression that occurs. This happens all the time in hospitals, for example, in GI labs, in cardiac labs, wherever anybody is sedated. And fentanyl, of course, is used quite commonly in the hospital situation. But they always have Narcan standing by because of the respiratory depression. But we have to remember that these people are still drunk, and how they react to that varies considerably, as you've already noted.
Yeah, I mean, again, back to why we use Narcan, I'd rather support someone who's gotten Narcan than have to give it. And that's the big push for the family-based. And again, a lot of it, everybody has to remember, is that Narcan's not the solve-all. And one dose of Narcan may not, and oftentimes does not last out the amount of drug on board somebody may have. And, and there's still a medical condition there once you receive Narcan. It's not, like the doc said, it just doesn't wake you up magically. It's a chemical process to just keep you breathing. Oh. Two? Who let him answer?
Yeah, hold on, can you take his mic?
Test. Oh, there we go. Bob, 2 questions.
Sure.
We've had you here before at Post to speak to our students, and I thought it was very interesting when you talked about the different potency levels. I know you had it on your slideshow, but if you can just reiterate between morphine, fentanyl, and then carfentanil, and just maybe talk a little bit about what is carfentanil actually used for. And then my second question is, what is being done on a national level to stem the tide of fentanyl and carfentanil from China to the U.S., Canada, and Mexico?
So the doctor might be able to help me out with actually the dosage of the morphine and the heroin, but to get to carfentanil supposedly is 10 times stronger than morphine. And while I'm not a doctor or anything in the medical, 10,000 times. And morphine's like the standard for all pain medications, and but it was originally designed for large animals, elephants, rhinoceros, for veterinarians. And I think one of the issues is a lot of people are like, okay, morphine's this strong, heroin's this strong. What are the strengths of these fentanyl analogs? And I think part of the problem is a lot of the analogs we're seeing are basically research chemicals. There's stuff that scientists and doctors were researching to try and come up with other life-saving drugs that nobody's really done extensive testing on. So there's no real way to actually determine what their actual strength is compared to morphine. And it's one of those things where, like, and this will get into where we are with China and that part, but that's why you see like W18, there's really 42 different Ws. There's W1 through W42 that some scientists, I believe in Canada, were working on trying to develop more, newer, better drugs for, legitimate purposes that never made it to, the pharmaceutical end to be produced because of whatever reason there is. And what we're seeing, and this is where the internet plays a part, is you're seeing people, a lot of these publications that the doctors and scientists wrote are available online. And if you research enough, you're going to find them. And basically what they're doing is they're taking these chemical compounds and they're just sending them to China and saying, hey, produce this for me and send it to me. And that's where we're seeing it. And so to get into the second part of your question, where we are with China now, the federal government and China, well, the State Department and China have signed an agreement. They're going to crack down on carfentanil and send it to the United States. Okay, but are they going to really crack down on the precursors going to Mexico? That hasn't been addressed. And what about all the different analogs? And, that's one of the things we're seeing with the analogs. You're seeing all these different analogs. And I could tell you, I would say probably every other month I'm getting notifications from DEA and I believe it's NEFLIS, the National Federation of Laboratories or something like that, where they're discovering from police seizures and overdose blood data new analogs they've never come across before. And through their testing they believe it's some sort of fentanyl analog, and they actually have to do more tests and send it to specialists to try and figure out what it is, and it ends up being some analog nobody's ever seen of fentanyl before. And they're just changing one molecule or one carbon on it to change the technically what it is to try and get around law enforcement. And we saw a lot of the same stuff with synthetic marijuana when it was popular. We would outlaw one compound, and then they would create another compound that was basically the same thing. It was technically a different chemical makeup, but had the same effects, name it something, and start selling it again. So we were always playing that catch up, and that's sort of where we are right now with all the different fentanyl analogs.
Great, thanks. So, Bob, Adam, myself will be around here for a little bit if you have any additional questions. Okay.
Oh, good.
I know I also have a loud voice, so. I just was curious. I know the law that Governor Malloy signed into effect in July talked about data sharing. And I know that we just recently received all the medical examiners' data. But I was wondering, while you were planning this, and what your discussion with Commissioner Pino was on trying to get, I'm so happy to hear, that Waterbury is sharing this data internally. But it is a problem in the districts, and I'm not going to say it's a district only, but trying to get that data is extremely hard from our EMS and our fire. And I understand building collaboration is extremely important, and I'm trying all that. But sometimes I'm wondering if Commissioner Pino was going to be doing anything.
Right, so we've actually had great cooperation from the state. So anytime myself, David, as part of the CADH subcommittee, have contacted the state for data, we've had it within days. I really have to compliment Susan Logan from DPH and her entire team. I mean, we ask for it, we get it. Our issue is we need it locally, and we need live data. The subcommittee really believes that this should be a reportable disease. We really think if we're getting these, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm getting a tremendous amount of chlamydia, gonorrhea reports, okay? Every day we're getting those. But I get nothing about overdoses. We'll have to see. But in November, there's the committee that looks at the reportable diseases each year meets. We're trying to talk to the directors of health on that committee regarding it. We received some questions about that. I don't think every director sees the value in it. We know that for data, we're going to benefit getting it locally from our police, fire, EMS, rather than waiting for it to go up to the state and back down. I think we have a lot to talk about with that. I think making a reportable disease is our first step. We'll continue and we'll push for it.
Shane, can I add?
Yes, sir.
Actually, I had a couple
Oh, yeah.
things too. I mean,
So this is what Bob and I actually do. So for the core grant specifically, it's not just for the city of Waterbury. It's for the region. And you know, as Cindy said, you know, you could take your little road show, and that's what we do. So I mean, I spoke to CADH. I spoke to Connecticut Career Chiefs. If you want to have a meeting with your small town or your district and bring your EMS people, quite frankly, they're more apt to listen to one of their own. And I you know, I see everybody kind of shaking their head. You know, it's very difficult for someone outside the service that's not a police officer, and we have those abilities here. And I know the folks from New Haven, and I know the folks from some of the other districts personally, not districts as in the health districts, but I know your EMS providers. And I know it's a small community in Connecticut as far as responders go, and we're pretty much all friends. So I can't promise you that we can convince them, but what I would say to you is if you are having difficulties, let us come in and show what we've done and how easy it is. Trust me, you're not the first, you're not the first district or department that's come up to me and said, I would love to start doing this stuff, but my police department is gun shy about releasing this data. Or the EMS chief in our town said HIPAA protects it. Or, a lot of times what happens is people just aren't aware, and, the overall good of these programs far outweighs any risk of liability for information problems. My opinion. So we'll illustrate that. I think we'll be up here for a couple minutes after this. I know we got to get the shuttles back, so we got to get out of here. But Bob does this actually for a living. That's what HIDA's main goal is.
So one of the things I wanted to add on that is, like, since the beginning, since I started in this job 2 years ago, one of the major issues was not only data, but data right now, not from 2014 or 2015. So luckily, being from New Haven, my partner and I actually have met with Dr. Filene, who spearheaded CORE, while he was coming up with the report to basically, I don't want to say we helped him, but, he asked us questions about the law enforcement aspect and high-level stuff and what the regions was seeing and, to use the HIDA network. And the Washington-Baltimore HIDA actually created an OD map. It's called OD map. It's a basically live-time mapping system with a lot of data in the background that you can access. We previewed that for Dr. Filene. He liked it. The core team liked it. And 2 weeks ago, we actually previewed it for Commissioner Pino and the commands at DPH. They seem to really like it, and it seems like it's something that might go forward, but it is the state, so you can't just say, yeah, let's do it and jump right into it, especially with no budget. But the thing is free. It's just manpower to actually get everything talking. So it does look like we're moving that way, and everybody's receptive to going that way. So, it does look like hopefully at some point it's going to come. Okay, apparently you got to go.
Thanks.
Oh, we're all done here? There's nothing to see?
So on behalf of CADH, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I certainly don't think this will be our last one, but I think it was a great initial one. Waterbury Fire Department does have some Narcan training over there. If you want to stay, learn about that, learn about their program a little bit, or go through the training, I think they're available. We do have the shuttles running till 12:30, I think. 12:45, somewhere around there. So you do have a little bit of time, but we won't leave anybody stranded here. So.
Will we also be around if you just want to ask personal questions?
Yeah. So thank you for coming.